Hi everyone, hope you're good. In today's video I want to discuss the topic of GAS, gear acquisition syndrome, and what is the best camera for wedding photography in 2023. Technology moves fast these days, and Moore's law is a good grounding for this. Moore's law states that the number of transistors on a microchip doubles every 2 years. The law claims that we can expect the speed and capability of our computers and or electronics to increase every 2 years. So the lure of a shiny new camera or lens is always present. The belief that you need the latest and greatest. I always advocate a need versus want approach when it comes to gear, and so should you. And to back this up, I'm going to answer the question, what is the best camera for wedding photography in 2023? The best camera isn't the latest shiny new toy, the 64 megapixel sensor, the 30 frames per second. It's the camera you have or plan to buy that can do the job. For example, the Sony I, Sony's flagship camera, currently $6,000 here in the UK through Wexphoto. Amazing camera, don't get me wrong. Here's a few of the specs. 50.1 megapixel full frame sensor. Stunning 8K video footage at 30 frames per second. Blackout free continuous shooting at up to 30 frames per second. 15 stops of dynamic for stills and 15 plus stops for video. World's first electronic viewfinder with 240 frames per second. 759 face detection points covering approximately 92% of the image area. 5-axis IBIS. It's a £6,000 camera. Will it take a great photo? Maybe. I'll come back to that maybe in a moment. Let's compare the Sony I to my first Sony camera I used for wedding photography, the Sony A7 III, at only £1,700 from Wex. I actually found one for £1,200 on MPB second hand. So specs wise, let's compare the main points. 24.2 megapixel full frame sensor, 4K high dynamic range video without pixel binning, 693 face detection and 425 contrast detection AF points, 15 stops of dynamic range, 5-axis IBIS. So ultimately, the Sony A1 on paper is the better camera. I'm not denying that. Will both cameras get a great photo? Maybe. The maybe part of both these cameras, and any camera, regardless if it's a Pentax or a $50,000 Hasselblad H6D, is great photos come from behind the camera. The camera's just a tool. For purpose of the video, I'll stick to my industry, wedding photography. Am I bothered about any video features at all? No. Would I be happy to pay less and take all video features out of the camera? Damn right I would. So, comparison wise, for professional wedding photography, can we scrap the whole 4K versus 8K debate? It's irrelevant. Nice to have, but we are photographers. We're not shooting video. If you are, fair enough. I'd still beg the question of how many people have an 8K television. I'd still say the world is still catching up with 4K. A 50.1 megapixel sensor in the Sony I versus the 24.2 in the A7 III. I know which one is a wedding photographer I want to use. Storing hundreds of thousands of images just costs money. Let's face it, I shoot Sony A9s these days with a 24.2 megapixel sensor. I've cropped images by 50% sometimes and exported them back to 6000 on the long edge and delivered the image. There's no need for more than 24 megapixels. I would like 30 megapixels as a sweet spot, but this again is a want rather than a need. Would the A7 III meet my needs for megapixels? Yeah. By the way, it's worth stating at this point there are numerous photographers out there with big followings who shoot crop sensor cameras, such as Kevin Mullins, John Branch III, who both use the FUJI system. I actually want a FUJI for personal life photography. I digress. Back to the comparisons. The Sony A1 has a much better frames per second shooting, much like the Sony A9 here. The 30 frames per second and 20 frames per second respectively. The Sony A7 III can do 10. Now, from someone who has shot 250 plus weddings in 5 years and the majority of the Sony A9 and 20 frames per second, I can tell you I've never put the camera in 20 FPS. It lives in 5 FPS, and during the ceremony I obviously know when the kisses come in, so I'll put into 10 FPS for the kiss, then switch back to 5 FPS. That's it. So max I go to is 10 FPS. So would the A7 III meet my needs? Yeah, it would. Both cameras have pretty much the exact same dynamic range, IBIS and autofocus points, with the A1 having around 70 more points. Yes, the A1 is going to shoot fast moving objects much better than the A7 III, but a bride coming down the aisle is hardly Usain Bolt. So I repeat the title of the video. what is the best camera for wedding photography in 2023? For me, it's the tool that best fits your wedding photography needs. I say tool as that's how you should look at it. You buy a hammer once every 15 years, a hammer still hits a nail in wood regardless of extra features they put on it. Much like a camera. For my personal circumstances, I would still have the A7 III bodies. They're an excellent camera, and anyone looking to dive in the Sony ecosystem at low cost, they would be my number one recommendation. The only reason I upgraded to 2 Sony A9 bodies over 2 A7 III bodies was the stack sensor of the A9 allows me to shoot completely silent. No more clicking and making the subject camera aware. For someone who wants to work in a documentary fashion, shooting silent is a game changer. So silent shutter is pretty much the only feature that I wanted. If I had to use an A7 III tomorrow for a wedding, would my images suffer? Would I come away with crap images? No. To me, it has autofocus. Will it lock on the subject and will it take a photo? The quality of the image would be the same. The colours would be the same as they're both Sony. The greatness of the image, as I've mentioned, comes from us, the eyeballs behind the camera. We all see things differently. We all have varying creativity levels. A good photograph is well known to be made up of great composition, moment and light, regardless of camera used to get the image. I've seen YouTube videos of photographers shooting Hasselblad cameras for stationary couples on styled or engagement shoots. It's overkill. And to me, it comes across a bit like, ooh, look at me, you know. To further prove a point, at some point in the future, I'm going to pick up a cheap camera, even maybe a film point and shoot. Ask to second shoot a friend's wedding and showcase the images to demonstrate a camera is just a tool. And yes, the tool can have great ISO performance or autofocus, for example, but the bulk of a great image comes from experience, creativity, knowledge, and practice. It's us. I could easily go back to my start in 2018 with the same camera I had then and shoot much better photographs than I did back then. Education is important and the cornerstone to shooting better photographs. I still want to learn. There's always something to top up the cup. Your cup is never full. Be willing to learn. I'm planning on doing just that. Looking at conferences to attend such as Doc Day in Ireland, possibly the 9 Dots Gathering, as I've never been. This whole video is my attempt to showcase that you should invest in yourself rather than gear. If you have a camera that does what you need it to do and your lenses are good, invest in yourself. Education's all around us. Sam Docker, 9 Dots, Doc Day, Fearless conferences and so many more. A £1,200 camera or a £6,000 camera can easily get the same shot of a wedding couple standing in a ceremony or a guest laughing during the reception. Think what you could do with $4,800. You could attend Doc Day in Ireland, the gathering with 9 Dots in Leeds this year, could purchase a lifetime access to Sam Docker's course and still have over $3,000 left to buy spots on maybe's free destination wedding workshops to build a portfolio of international work. Believe in yourself and invest in your education. If I gave that £50,000 Hasselblad to Uncle Joe at a wedding and he second shot the entire wedding, what do you think the photos are going to look like? Do you think they would look better than mine with a £1,200 camera? Maybe. Okay, I've drove the point home. The best camera for 2023 is the one you have now, if it's doing the job. If a new camera has features that you need, upgrade. Like I did, as silent shooting was going to be integral to my approach. If you want a camera because you like the sound of it, it's just a want, so it's an irrational purchase. Becoming a better wedding photographer will always lead to increasing your prices, which means down the line you have lots of Benjamins to spend on gear. But if you're still at the early stages, keep what you have, it's doing the job. If you're buying a new camera, get the cheapest you can get to get the job done. Right. Little bit clickbaity, the title, I've just realised, as I'm not actually saying go get this camera, but I felt it was an important message to share. I'd love to hear from you in the comments what camera and lenses you're shooting. Do you agree or disagree with what I've had to say? The channel is a community. I want to hear from you. I'll see you in the next video.